started. My name is Katrina Hasan Hamilton. I am the NAACP San Diego branch education chair. And today I welcome you to the NAACP San Diego and San Diego State University Black Minds Project, working together to improve outcomes for all Black children and families.
All right, everyone. Well, definitely go ahead and get us started on behalf of my sister and colleague in this work, Katrina Hamilton. And first of all, I want to just thank you for agreeing to or for coming here today to the NAACP San Diego branch's Education Symposia. And this theme for tonight is Black Teachers Matter and why Black Teachers Matter. And we will have several panelists who are amazing, who are coming to you and talking about the work that they do. But also know that this upcoming Saturday, there's another panel that's focused on parent engagement, and that we're doing, and that we're supporting that in collaboration with our colleagues for the NAACP. And so what I'd like to do is have the panelists go ahead and just begin by introducing themselves and providing background on how their work relates to the concept of Black Minds Matter and Black Lives Matter and Black Education Matters. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague and my brother in this work, Dr. Adisa Alkebulan, who is the chair of Africana Studies at San Diego State University and an all-around wonderful human being. Adisa?
Well, thank you, Dr. Wood. I appreciate those words. Good evening, everyone. I hope you all are doing well. Just again, briefly, I'm Adisa Alkebulan, Associate Professor and Chair of Africana Studies at SDSU. Just as a part of an introduction, and I look forward to having a broader conversation. I mean, Black Minds Matter, particularly in my discipline, and certainly it's not limited to my discipline, but we matter because we offer so much. And we also offer to our students a corrective to all of the, the foundational education that we all received that is rooted and steeped in white supremacy. So it's important for our Black minds to offer a corrective to much of how we've been indoctrinated in American society. Good to see you all.
Thank you, Dr. Alkebulan. I'd also like to introduce Dr. Ernest Black, who is with Cal State Teach. Dr. Black?
Good afternoon, everyone. So I am the system-wide director of Cal State Teach, which operates out of the CSU Chancellor's Office. Part of what I do is actively prepare teacher preparation programs to recruit and retain Black men in their programs. If we look at the CSU system-wide data, we know those numbers are falling drastically. In many cases, we can get Black men into the programs, we can't get them out. So we, as part of what we're doing as a system, is we're looking at what we need to do to retain Black men in our programs. And it's kind of sobering to realize that you are part of the problem. So the same things that's driving Black men away from teaching are the same things that we are doing to Black men to drive them away. So part of my overall goal is to make sure we not only reach Black men, encourage Black men, but also retain them in the profession.
With that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Joel Fulcher, who's with Sweetwater Union High School District. Dr. Fulcher?
All right, thank you. It's a delight to be here. First of all, let me offer a disclaimer. I'm semi-retired. Formal retirement is in June of this year. And since December, the end of the first semester, I'm no longer involved in the day-to-day activities of the district. So just want to make sure that's clear. But I think it's important to state, as I think about education now versus what was happening years ago when I entered the profession, very little has changed, at least from a systemic perspective. For us, education can never be just about teaching. We have to consider the historical, social, the political factors, as well as the implications. We also have to keep in mind, I think, that historically we were seen as being devoid of culture. There was a social view of cultural non-existence for all Black Americans. Crucial to that, of course, is that legally it was against the law to teach Black kids, Black people in general. And so education has a rich and racist past. And I think the history of the discipline is important, but also understanding the purpose of education is an imperative as well. There was and still is an absolute relationship between schools and our society. And as a matter of note, schools are a pretty important organ, I think, of society. They socialize students to adapt to the economic, political, social institutions of this country. And there's some latent and manifest functions that we need to be aware of. In many cases, they involve the sharing of norms. When compulsory education came around, we saw the inclusion of a large number of students. And we saw for the first time that concept of social efficiency. It was expanded to some extent. And students who didn't fit the prescribed structure were excluded via special education, suspensions, expulsions, you name it. They were moved. So Black teachers, Black educators absolutely matter. It goes without saying that their work is critical, is important. I think our Black teachers have offered an internal critique, and also by virtue of their membership in the community, an external critique that has helped at least address many of the necessary structures that need to be not just disrupted, but absolutely changed. So I'm hoping to share a little more as we go, but this system cannot exist without the tremendous and well-qualified African-American and Black teachers that I've had the privilege of working with and hope to continue in my retirement, spending time with them. So thanks for having me. It's good to be here, and I appreciate the invite.
Thank you, Mosely from the Black Teacher Project.
Thank you. And as everyone has said, thanks for having me. So, I'm the founder and director of the Black Teacher Project, and it is our work is near and dear to my heart. I knew I wanted to teach since I was 15, but like many Black teachers, kind of got forced out of the classroom, given the expectations and the lack of support. So creating the Black Teacher Project is rooted in an interruption of the reproduction of many of the oppressive forces that Dr. Fulcher spoke to. Our work is really focused on professional development done in racial affinities, so PD for Black teachers, by Black teachers. And we are focused in two umbrellas. One is around supporting Black teachers and healing from oppression. And so, as was said earlier, we understand that if we actually take time to think about how we're impacted, just because we have these fancy degrees and these titles after our name, doesn't mean that we're not harmed. And if we don't heal from that harm, we will reproduce it and just teach other children across race, particularly Black children, how to make it through oppression. So the other half of what we do in the Black Teacher Project is support Black teachers through that healing, but then into leadership to support the transformation of schools. So our professional development is like, from the classroom, what can you as a Black teacher do to change what's happening? Not just in your curriculum and your pedagogy, but make changes systemically. And for that, teachers need support in their leadership. They need support in breaking through the traditional role of what a teacher is supposed to do. And so our work is really doing our best to contribute to the liberation of Black people. And Dr. Way, I don't know if you were going to introduce her. Are you going to introduce Lisa, or should I? The famous 2020, you're on mute. I didn't know if you wanted us to introduce ourselves together.
Yes, please do. I'm sorry. I was on mute. Thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah, so, you know, as part of our work in lifting up Black teacher leadership, things like this, you know, really thinking we're going to talk about why Black teachers matter. Let's hear from Black teachers. So part of our work in the project is having a fellowship program that supports Black teachers through deeper leadership practice, like getting access to experiences like this, like transforming their schools. So Lisa Kelly is one of the teachers in BTP and one of our Black Teacher Project fellows. So I'll let her say a bit more.
Thank you, Micia. My name is Lisa Kelly. I teach 6th grade English in Oakland, California, in the Fruitvale area. I teach a mostly Latino population with some Black students and some Asian students mixed in. I don't have any white students. And Black minds and Black work matter to me. Black teachers matter because that's what I try to center my curriculum around. Even if the majority of my students are not Black, a lot of my students are coming in with anti-Black prejudices, are coming in with things that they've learned from their families, from their communities about Black people. And just having a teacher that represents their community is a start, but also having a teacher that centers Blackness in their curriculum and everything that I do is actually quite different from what most of the kids have experienced, even in what was historically Black Oakland, right? So thank you for having me.
And thank you for being here. And then I can also introduce myself. My name is Luke Wood, and I serve as, gosh, you hear the dog in the background. I serve as a professor of education at San Diego State University and vice president for student affairs and campus diversity at the same institution. And I head up a project called the Black Minds Matter, which is a public and ongoing course that we've done focused on advancing issues facing Black children and youth and adults in education, recognizing that oftentimes we're treated with distrust, disdain, and disregard, assumptions of criminality where our children are early on assumed to be troublemakers, labeled for wrongdoing as being bad, troublemakers, aggressive, deviant, defiant, all kinds of different words that you can think of. And then from there, they are more closely monitored by educators, singled out for punishments or for discipline. And when they're subjected to discipline, we find that it's much more harsher and more prolonged than that of other children. And we recently released a report, in fact, this week, called Suspending Our Future, which looks at suspensions of Black children and youth in California. And one of the things that really stood out in terms of the report that we just released was we looked at the population of Black students in California, and Black students across the state of California account for 5.3% of the population. But when we look at those who are subject to a physical restraint, and that would be a teacher coming behind a student and restraining their arms so they can't move their arms, their body, their leg, their head, that would be, even though we're only 5.3% of the population, we account for 18.6% of those who are physically restrained. Even though we're only 5.3% of the population, we account for 24.6% of those who are subject to an exclusion or seclusion, which is essentially putting a child in an involuntary confinement in a room or area for a specific period of time. And we also found in our report that while we're only 5.3% of the population, we count for 31.4% of those who are subject to mechanical restraints. That can be handcuffs or other mechanical devices that restrain a child from being able to engage in the learning environment. That's on top of all the challenges we've seen with expulsion, suspensions in the school, suspensions out of school, and other forms of exclusionary discipline. So I come to this work from the perspective is we have to do better, and we have to better prepare educators to engage students who many of them never believed that they would be educating. And so for those of you who've been part of that work, you know that we say on a regular basis that we see a linkage between Black lives and Black minds, in that Black lives and Black minds are intertwined. If one does not value the life, then they certainly will not value the mind. And I think it's with that kind of thinking and sense making that we come to this conversation today. And it'd be a great opportunity now for us to turn to our panelists and have them talk about the work that they were doing in their respective areas to increase the representation of Black teachers and Black faculty and Black educators throughout the pipeline. And with that, we're going to go ahead and turn it back over to Dr. Adisa Alkebulan.
All right, thanks, Luke. Well, one of the things that we're doing in Africana Studies, well, I mean, first of all, we are Black. I mean, so, I mean, there's that. But at San Diego State University right now, and I thought that maybe Luke would talk more about this. I don't know if he is or not, but SDSU is in the process of hiring a number of faculty members. And they're calling it a cluster hire, where they're focusing on hiring African-American or Africana faculty across the university. In Africana Studies, we're involved in 2 searches right now. So we will be bringing in 2 additional faculty. This is something that's much needed in Africana Studies, and I'm hoping this is just the beginning of many more hires, bringing Black faculty not only into our department, but across the university. But I'm actually going to, and I hope that the organizers don't mind this, but I'm actually going to, change up what I had prepared to talk about. So I'm going to talk about something completely different than what I intended, because I think we're all probably going through a lot of different things right now. Some of it may be COVID related, some of it may not. But for 4 consecutive weeks, I lost 4 people, 4 mentors of mine. I mean, literally, one died week 1, the second died week 2, the third week 3, fourth, etc. And the last 2 who passed away was particularly devastating, because the last 2 were professors of mine in college. And not only that, but they were actually my, I had 4 village fathers when I was in college. So there were 4 Black men who embraced me, as one of their own. And even after graduating in the 1990s, I remained very close to all of them. And 2 of them were the most recent to pass away. So I changed it up because one of the, aside from grief, I mean, obviously that's there. But during the grief, I had the opportunity to just reflect on my time in college, but also what these 2 men, these 2 Black men, meant to me. And they meant a lot. And in fact, when I was in college, I had no aspirations whatsoever becoming a college professor. I mean, my career path, was supposed to go, in a couple of different directions, and certainly not into academia. But one of the things that, I realized after I kind of reflected on their lives and their impact on me was that so much of who I am as a person, as a man, but also so much of who I am as a scholar, as a teacher, I owe in part to these 2 men. One of them, I mean, it was Dr. Timothy Moore and Dr. Edward Crosby. And Edward Crosby, in particular, he founded the Department of Pan-African Studies at Kent State University. So he is an institution to himself in Northeast Ohio. When I went to, I think I just mentioned Kent State University. And Kent State was also the very first place, time, 1971, the very first Black History Month was celebrated at Kent State University, and it was organized by Edward Crosby. And I only say that to say that, that was the type of model that I had to do my best to emulate. And I haven't done that by any stretch. But one of the things that I learned as I reflect on his life and our relationship is that much of what he taught me, much of what he was for me, I have become for a lot of my current and former students. I had just last week, I'll give you an example. I'm teaching a class on Blacks in the US justice system. And I had a student who is in the class who was near dropping out. And she had already, accepted that she was dropping out, and she just wanted to extend me the courtesy and respect to let me know that she was dropping out of school. It was just difficult for her. She's a non-traditional student. She has 3 children who she's homeschooling, and she's formally incarcerated. So she felt that with all of the things that's going on, and even getting a college degree was a waste of her time, given that, I mean, she referred to herself as a felon. I told her that I refused to, refer to her as that she's a human being. But we compromised, and she didn't mind me referring to her as formally incarcerated. In any event, she's still enrolled in San Diego State University. And she decided not to drop out of college, to just kind of press forward. And she was very appreciative and grateful that I took the time to convince her that, she was better in school than outside of school. And I won't go into, many more details of what we talked about, but I use that also as an example as to why Black teachers matter. And I'm not saying that non-Black professor of hers, may not have encouraged her to stay. But I've been working at San Diego State University for almost 20 years, and I don't know very many of them who would have done that. But that's a charge that many of us have. I can't remember what one of the other panelists said, but I agree, or I don't remember who said it, but I agree. I think it was Dr. Fulcher, that we mean so much more to our students, and we do so much more for our students than just teach them. So as I grieve and reflect on the life of my time in college and the teachers that I have, that is the message that I wanted to share. And I hope you all don't mind that I kind of, deviated from the script a little bit. I, just not in the head, wasn't in the headspace to, kind of give this scripted presentation, but of course, Black teachers matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Alkebulan. And I think that your comments only demonstrate the importance of Black teachers by demonstrating the effect they've had on your own life and your own career. So thank you for sharing that. Dr. Black, would you like to talk a bit about what your organization is doing to help promote Black teachers and Black educators? And currently you're on mute, so you'll need to.
Okay, yes.
The same thing that Dr. Mosely gave me.
So, I was going to start by talking about statistics. How many Black teachers there are, how many Black male teachers there are, the trajectory of the Black student, if they have just one Black teacher, the role of the Black male teacher and with Black male students. But I think we know all that, right? I mean, none of this stuff is new. I did a dissertation 15, 16 years ago that had all of this stuff in it, and it was from the 70s. So we know all of this. I guess the question is, what are we going to do about it? So I'm going to start by kind of teasing out what we are doing and what we're capable of doing and what we're allowed to do. So some of these gains that we make that some of the other panelists are talking about and the things that we want to do, some of this is legislation. So some of this is put into legislation, testing, for example, for teachers, GPAs for teachers. Now, I don't know about your college experience, but mine was not that great. I went to a PWI that did not want any Black people there. So my grades weren't going to be the top tier. And the professors would tell you, you're not going to get an A. You'll be lucky if you get a B, but you'll probably get a C. That's going in, right? And I think someone else mentioned this, being an educator was not my goal. But it became a goal to show how old I am after the Million Man March. So I went to the Million Man March became an educator. Immediately after that, I had 2 children, boys. Now I'm a young teacher with young sons, and I'm looking at how teachers talk to Black boys in particular. I'm looking at what they're saying to them and the trajectory their life then takes. And I was determined at that point, like, I got to get a doctorate in education. And it was solely personal, because I didn't want any teachers talking to my children that way. But at a certain point, you know, you're thinking, well, what about everybody else's kid? And what can I do there? So as we enter, you know, what we're doing in teacher preparation and trying to, the data hasn't changed. I'll put it that way. I can't say it's not going to, but it hasn't changed. Most teachers are still white women. I guarantee most teachers will still be white women next year, maybe in the year after that. So what are we going to do to change their mindset? So we know that we need Black teachers in the classroom for Black students. We know that many Black students never have a Black teacher. So we need to develop some sort of, when we bring in Black teachers in Black classrooms, there's an unspoken bond there between the teacher and the student. The teacher can kind of navigate what resembles the home situation for the student. There's talking without words between the student and the teacher. You know, when we have that at that level of understanding, there's a shared history between that teacher and that student. That shared history can translate into higher academic achievement, lower suspension rates. Lower suspension rates can translate into a whole host of other things: economic empowerment, stability, breaking that generational curse that we very often talk about. And as Dr. Fulcher said, education is not just about teaching. So we need not just Black teachers, but every teacher to understand that teaching is not just about teaching. That when you come into our classrooms, you need to understand our students. Our students don't need to understand you. I've said this before to teacher candidates, and they get a little upset. You know, you walked into their world, they didn't walk into yours. You need to make sure that what you're giving out is what they need and not just what you want to give. So when we talk to our Black male teacher candidates, you know, we have discovered that many of our Black male teacher candidates are treated exactly the same way as our Black students in school. So there's another layer of something we need to overcome there. So as I said before, teaching was not my first goal. Partly because of school. So we're bringing in people who we've kind of convinced to do this. Then we treat them badly when they get here. That's a recipe for disaster. So we have to, at some point, begin to understand that our teachers need to be more ingrained in that community. They need to understand more about the lives of students on top of, you know, understanding curriculum and how to teach that group of students that year. So part of what we do, and Cal State Teach in particular, is that we do a mentoring group with our teacher candidates, our male teacher candidates of color. We meet once a month, maybe every 2 weeks now. And it started out with us trying to teach them how to navigate the system. And then I got an epiphany. And I think I heard one of the panelists say something about this. I was trying to teach them how to navigate this system. I should be teaching them how to change this system. And once I understood that for myself, now how I relate to them can be different. So I don't need to teach them anymore. Okay, your principal's going to say this on day 1, your superintendent's going to say this on day 5. Get your credential first, get tenure, and then you can shake it all up. They need to be in a place where they can start that shaking, because that 3, 4, 5 years that we're waiting for them to be able to be in a place to shake it up, we've lost children there. We've lost time there. And we need to be able to say that the practices in teacher preparation that are oppressive not only to Black teacher candidates, but Black students need to cease now. So part of that is also rewriting our curriculum to make sure that not only teacher candidates know how to teach Black students, but that you understand what you're teaching. You know, this mentoring piece that we've done for our men of color in our program has been essential in keeping them in the program, but also giving them a voice that they don't have. Cal State Teach is an elementary or multiple subject teacher preparation program. So most of our teacher candidates end up in elementary school, as I taught elementary school myself. And it can be a lonely place if you are the only man on campus, if you're the only Black man on campus. So we're trying to give them at least an avenue to say, hey, this is what happened today. What do I do? This is where I want to go with this. What are the possibilities of me being in this profession? So that's part of what we're working on. And as part of the CSU system, something we want to ingrain in every teacher preparation program across the system.
Thank you, Dr. Black. That was very powerful, and you're doing some incredible work. I think we are all appreciative of what you're doing for our community. I am happy to announce that Katrina is back as a moderator. She's here to carry forth the conversation. That's Katrina Hasan Hamilton, and I'm just, I was glad to step in for a moment into some big shoes and turn those shoes right back over to Katrina, our future Dr. Hamilton.
Thank you, Dr. Wood, and greetings to everyone. Yes, I appreciate you so much, as we all do, and all the great work that you're doing, Dr. Wood. I was getting lost in what Dr. Black was saying in regards to being the only one, because I'm sure a lot of us participants on this Zoom right now have been the only one, whether you are male or female, and it's a lonely place. So one of the things that we are going to talk about a little bit later on is not only recruiting more Black educators, but how do we retain them? You know, how do we create those safe spaces for Black educators so that they can stay in the profession and move up to be administrators? That's another lonely place that we'll talk about. But before we move on, there is a question, and if Dr. Fulcher can chime back in, what is the difference between African American and Black teachers? Dr. Fulcher, are you here?
Yes, I am. I'm coming in right now. I'll get to that in just a second, but I was just so taken by some of the comments I've heard already. I would give almost anything to be a college student again now, because when I was a student, these things weren't always discussed, and there weren't people around who kind of took the ball and ran with it to the extent I'm hearing now. Let me go in a roundabout way to get to your point, because I think it's an important one, and I think it's also crucial to know that our schools need quality teachers, white and Black. Our classrooms are absolutely, using another battlefield statement, ground zero. And our schools, like it or not, have tackled many of the issues that our society has been unwilling to address, from gender identity to gender in general, to race. Now, we haven't done a good job in education, not always, of addressing it, but we've tackled a lot of those issues, sometimes better than others. We have been talking about equality and equity for a long time, equality longer than equity. And I mention all the time to people I speak with that we didn't do a real good job dealing with equality. And now we're turning the page, maybe not completely, and talking about equity. So there's some things in education we need to work through, without a doubt. And I think because of the traditional role of education and schools and Black teachers, we are in a better place now because of the work I hear from Dr. Wood, Dr. Adisa, and Dr. Black, because of the work they're doing and others. I think we'll see a better quality of teachers coming down and through the pipeline. The teachers in my district, the Black teachers in my former district, they feel isolated and alone. They often feel unwelcome. And so to address that, we gave them a number of opportunities to talk. Both my previous boss, the former superintendent of the school, myself, we visited a number of schools and just sat and listened to our teachers and staff talk about what was on their mind. A lot of things revolved around the relationships they had with their colleagues, their administrators. And so the work they shared with us, or the concerns they shared with us, we developed a plan, an action plan to kind of address it. And I think we were making pretty good progress in terms of addressing a lot of the questions and concerns that people were raising. I think politically, Katrina, just to get to your point, I think there's a political and historical response to what you're asking. I think a lot of it is about determining who we are. Self-definitions are certainly important. I remember reading something about a question that could be asked about our last names, and hearing so often from different people I've worked with that what you call me isn't important, is what I answer to, that's even more critical and crucial. So I think whether you want to be referred to as African American or Black, it's your personal decision and choice. There are some political implications for both. And I think that, that's a class in and of itself. And I'm sure Dr. Adisa can talk to that probably better than I can. I think my evolution went from, because I'm a little older than most of the people on this panel, way back to where I was hearing people referred to as Negroes, and still are referred to in some corners of this country, to Black, African Americans, and then we're back at Black again. So I think politically, it certainly has some ramifications about how we're answered, what we answer to, and how we want to be referenced. But I think it becomes a personal choice. And I'll leave it at that. And I'm sure that someone a little more qualified to respond, like Adisa and Wood, can address it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fulcher. And now I have the honor of if Dr. Fulcher was not an honor enough, I have the honor of introducing Dr. Micia Mosely, who is the founder of the Black Teacher Project. And she will be joined by Lisa Kelly, who is an actual Black Teacher Project Fellow. So without further ado, Dr. Mosely and Miss Kelly.
Thank you. Thank you. We got to connect with folks a little bit earlier. I want to take up this question that you asked Dr. Fulcher because, you know, when naming the Black Teacher Project, I made a choice and I was very specific about my choice. We are not the Teacher of Color Project. We are not the African American Teacher Project. We are the Black Teacher Project. And for me, so I live in Oakland, California. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. And I tell people, when I came to California, I was like, oh, it's a whole different kind of Black people out here. California is a whole different setup than Brooklyn. Like, not just hip hop, just like in general, right? So here I find folks being like, oh, I'm from Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, maybe you get a little Oklahoma flavor, you know, there's an area, right? But growing up in Brooklyn, everybody's like, what are you? I'm like, I'm Black. No, where are your people from? Bed-Stuy. No, where are they from? You know, like, so my experience on the East Coast was really a particular experience of the diaspora. And when I came here, I found more folks who maybe weren't descendants of folks who were enslaved on this land, being from Ethiopia or Eritrea, right? Whereas growing up in Brooklyn, Jamaica, Haiti, like just a whole bunch of different places, Ghana, Senegal. So for me, that shift and wave that Dr. Fulcher spoke to is very much about the diaspora, right? One, as an organization, your name can only be so long, right? So I could be the like African Diaspora Teacher Project, but what was true for me in putting the B in BTP was both a callback to our legacy of Black resistance, but also to include like our healing from oppression means we also have to clean up some internal Black stuff, right? Like not everybody gets down with everybody. Not everybody like, oh, we're different, you're different, you want to be different. Like even within communities that we claim to share, there's dissonance, there's just disagreement. There are people whose values show up in different ways. And so we wanted to have a project supporting teachers where folks can be all of who they are, understanding that if you're in this space, you are about transformation, right? So you can't just like roll up. Like we often said, it's not enough to be Black, right? We're more on the Thurgood Marshall than the Clarence Thomas tip, if you know what I'm saying. So for us, there is a viewpoint that we hold, but we're not policing Blackness. So it became an inclusive term for us and a way for us to kind of look at some of the nuance of just how we identify, how we're seen, right? And what that means for our work as Black teachers. So I wanted to share that perspective on the name and the distinction. And then the last thing I'll say before I turn it to Lisa is just this idea of what we do. We are definitely more on the retention and what we call sustainability side. But I would say part of what we do to increase the numbers in terms of recruitment is we are part of many organizations that those of you who are on social media, you've probably seen an uptick in Black educator organizations. We're trying to make being a Black teacher fabulous and amazing and attractive and funny and something that you want to do. Because as young people are graduating, if you have a college degree, the options of what you can do. And I would offer for folks who are often middle class, I don't see a lot of middle class folks encouraging their children to be teachers, right? It's you're gonna do some other kind of professional job. And it is often folks who come from more of an activist background across class, right? Whether that's working class or middle class, but more of an activist stance that will kind of be okay, but you got some other backup about how you really gonna make money though, right? So there's a whole thing about being a Black teacher in the 21st century that I think is very different when we're talking about recruitment than even, you know, I started teaching in 1995. Was that 26 years ago? That's a whole different setup. It's a whole different setup. I mean, one, there's the internet, but don't get me started. There was no, some of us remember the overhead projectors and stuff like that. So I just feel like what we're asking of folks in this moment has to be, this is the history teacher in me, has to be put in that kind of context, right? So. Lisa, I don't know if there's more you want to share about what we're doing to get more Black teachers. I know you have more on the other side too.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Mosley, and thank you all for having me. I think what I'll just talk about is a little bit about what it's like to be a Black teacher in this moment, at this time, at my particular school site. So I teach, as I told you guys, I teach in Oakland. I teach in the Fruitville district of Oakland, which is primarily Latino. And I teach a mix of Latino and Black kids, primarily Latino. And when I first came to Life Academy, I was pretty sure the only certificated Black teacher in the middle school. And I've been there for 4 years now. We have another one. So there's 2 of us that are certificated Black teachers in the middle school. And I faced a lot of anti-Blackness coming in, and so did my fellow students who were Black. And it culminated in the N-word being written in the bathroom of the high school. Our school is a 6 through 12. And so there's a high school as well, and the high school had the N-word written in it. And I had been bringing up all the facts, and they had been bringing up that Black students were not staying at our school. And finally, with that event, I was heard that I was saying that Black people are not feeling comfortable at our school. And so finally, we created a committee, we created a task force. And over the summer, this last summer, as we were ending our first half of the year of pandemic Zoom teaching, and we were entering that incredible summer of activism that we had, and of course, the terrible loss of life of Black people, I basically tearfully came on Zoom with my staff and was like, y'all, I'm gonna read this book, Stamped from the Beginning, the remix, the one for kids by Jason Reynolds and Ibrahim X. Kendi. If anybody wants to join me, I'll run a book club. I'd love to read it in community. This moment is really hard and I'd like to not be in it alone. And most of the staff joined me and would call into my Zoom once a week on a Saturday during the summer. And we read this book together, and that has turned into the entire school is reading the book, and we're reading it through advisory. And myself, that other Black teacher that I named, and the other Black teacher who's in the high school, the 3 of us are writing the curriculum that all of the advisories are doing to read and digest this book together. And it's messy. A lot of teachers, we already did a feedback survey, and some teachers were like, what about other POCs? What about other systems of oppression? And to me, the basis that I try to tell everybody is, with anti-Blackness and anti-indigeneity, which this country was built on, if we can dismantle those 2 things, then we dismantle all other systems of oppression. And if it's hard for you to center Blackness and to center Black people in your curriculum at this time, then interrogate that. So it's not easy to say these things and to be the representative of it on my staff. But as Micia said, I consider myself an activist. And I hope that everything that I do is for the liberation of Black people and for all people. And so that's what I'm trying to do with my work. Thank you for having me.
Lisa, thank you for being here. We're so proud of you and the work that you're doing, the work that Dr. Mosley is doing in creating this Black Teacher Project. And I think you essentially answered Dr. Fulcher's question, and Dr. Mosley came about going about the right way, being inclusive, the diaspora, Afro-Latina, that's who you are. You are Black. And I think that, I would love to see us as a people, like Dr. Mosley said, stop, she didn't say stop bickering, but we need to come together, right? Because there's strength in numbers. And I think that we could be so much more of a powerful force if we come together and understand that the world is just more than Black and white. It's more than just Black American and white American. It's diverse. We were diverse when we were brought over here, and we continue to be diverse. So I applaud you and I thank you. On that note, before we go into our breakout sessions, I don't know if it was done, but the first person who's able to put in the chat what the meaning of Alkebulan is will get a prize. And Dr. Adisa Alkebulan, my panelists, you cannot answer. Dr. Mosley is laughing.
I was just like, I think one person's gonna get it right away.
Right? I knew it was gonna be you. That's why I put that disclaimer out there. So whoever, yes. All right, Sister Kishana, yes. It's the land of the Blacks. And I'm going to give it to her because it was the first name of Africa. Before Africa was Africa, it was Alkebulan. So, you know, you must learn, right? We all must learn, and we continue to learn as educators. So on that note, we're going to break you out into 3 rooms. You have a choice. You can choose to be in breakout room number 1 with Dr. Luke Wood and Dr. Ernest Black. They're going to be talking about tips on creating Black faculty and admin clusters in higher ed, along with the role of higher education in recruiting more Black male teachers. So that's the first one. The second one, group 2, is Dr. Adisa A, and he's going to talk about the importance of Africana studies in P through 16 schools. And then the third one is going to be with Dr. Fulcher, Dr. Mosely, and Ms. Kelly. And they're going to talk about how can we best support and retain Black P through 12 teachers, counselors, school psychologists, and administrators, along with what is the Black Teacher Project really, and how can we bring it to our school district? So with the exception of my panelists, you know you're in 1, 2, or 3. I need everyone else to choose what room they're going to go into, and we're going to do that right now. So it looks like everyone has rejoined us. And again, excellent conversation. I was able to bob and weave out of each room multiple times. And so just the participants, you're amazing. I want to start with, I'm going to go a little bit out of order, and I'm going to start with Dr. Alkebulan, Dr. Adisa, and Dr. Maya is going to fill in as well. But the question that I pose to all of us, and I want the 2 of them to answer is, based on the conversation that we've had this evening, should Africana studies be a requirement for all people who are wanting or willing to become teachers, especially when we're talking about, we know that there are issues in the teacher ed programs. We know that a lot of times when students are taking these classes, they come in, once they become certified, they come in with a deficit thinking model. So should we have Africana studies as a requirement for teacher ed? At least 6 to 12 units. Dr. Adisa, can you start us off with that?
I absolutely think that we should have that requirement, because it is, I mean, first of all, you know, everyone who goes to school, you know, should be required to take, you know, a course in ethnic studies, but certainly, absolutely teachers should. And I think that it's a crime, so to speak, a crime that you can go through, you know, 16 years, 20 years of formal education, earning the highest academic achievement, and never have a single course that has any significant, relevant information about Black people in this country. And that's a crime. You know, it's absolutely a crime. So I think it is important for teachers to take classes in Africana studies, because they, you know, oftentimes, and most of them go into classrooms with no information whatsoever. You know, they cannot relate to African-American students. They have preconceived notions about who they are. We often like to talk about implicit bias, i.e. white supremacy. And, you know, all of those things, I mean, it's not going to, you know, eliminate it, but it would, I think, have a positive impact on the educational experiences of American students.
Thank you so much, Dr. Alkebulan. And Dr. Maya, did you want to chime in? Because would you like to share out, not would you like to share, can you share out for a minute, please, what you were going to say to add to that?
Yeah, thank you. I was just saying that I do, I think it's imperative that all students are able to engage in that academic study of Black people. Our Black folks, our stories are being told all the time. Students are seeing it in social media. They're constantly bombarded with these messages, and there's a lot of research out there that's showing that even at the youngest ages, like 2 and 3 years old, kids are learning messages about who they are and who other folks are. And as they get older, they start to put judgments on those things. So, maybe at 2 years old, I'm saying, oh, I'm darker than you. But then by 3, I'm saying darker is not as good as being lighter. So there's just this level of engagement that I think, especially as teachers, we need to know people's stories. We need to be able to deconstruct those images and those lies that students are often told, and that we are often told, right? So it requires, I think, having people who are closest to the pain, those folks who are whose stories are being told, to have their voices centered unapologetically in the in the curriculum, and to be able to do that with as many voices as possible, because we're not a monolith, but certainly it should be a requirement. Absolutely.
Definitely. Thank you so much for sharing that. So, and with that, I wanted to go to room number 1. Some great conversation was going on in there as well with Dr. Wood and Dr. Black. Dr. Wood was talking about race lighting, and he also was talking about racial battle fatigue by William Smith. And then, of course, Dr. Black was talking about the discipline with Black students, in particular Black males. And then, I wanted to, before we go to Dr. Wood, go to Dr. Black and say, Dr. Black, I'm looking at the time too, but what's really the difference between disciplining Black males in school versus disciplining our Black teachers, in particular our Black male teachers and our Black female teachers, and stifling them from becoming administrators? Like, what's that connection? What is that tied to?
The biggest connection, I think, and I said in the room previously, is that many of our Black teachers are treated the same way that we treat Black students. So there is definitely an effort to sequester Black students. That same thing happens to Black teachers, novice Black teachers, teacher candidates. Teacher candidates often are not given jobs. They did their student teaching at a school, and the school says, okay, well, thank you, we'll pass. New teachers are often not given tenure. In schools that will hire a refrigerator if it comes in, this Black man can't get a tenure, can't stay at this school, right? So we do a really great job, and I think Dr. Wood pointed that out in some of the work he was citing. It's really our racism, or their racism, that says, well, you're not good enough to teach here. You're not good enough to be a student here. Mind you, the people who don't understand that your greatness, as I said earlier, are the main ones who make that statement. So it's very equivalent. So our two lives intersect. And for the Black teacher, in many cases, that means this is the second time school has done this to them. So it's not likely that they're going to stay.
That's a great point. I know Dr. Mosely had mentioned that, especially with the middle class, we tend to push our children towards, other fields, but quite possibly, could it be that, folks don't want to be mistreated? They don't want to relive that vicious cycle of trauma, that racial battle fatigue, right? And that's, oh, go ahead, Dr. Black.
Well, parents have a lived school experience themselves, mm-hmm. and then they have their children's lived school experience. So they're less likely to say, okay, you know what, you've lived through this, I've lived through this. I want you to go back into this world and live through it again.
Mm-hmm.
They're more likely to say, you don't need that. I've prepared you to do something else.
Mm-hmm.
And I prefer that you would do something else.
Yes. Yes. Thank you so much, Dr. Black. And Dr. Wood, can you add on to that, especially with the race lighting and the racial battle fatigue that you shared with your breakout room as well?
Yeah, I mean, so what I had shared in the room were a number of concepts that I think is important for all of us just to understand, um, because they help to explain our experience in some ways that allows us a greater sense of agency and being able to navigate. It doesn't make things easier, but it makes us aware. The first I talked about was, microaggressions, how, and three main types that we oftentimes see. The first is distrust, where people are assumed to be dangerous, deviant, up to no good, um, troublemakers. The second is disregard, which assumes that we are academically inferior or incapable. And the third is um, disdain, which really refers to all perspectives or our communities, that we are lesser than, that our cultures, our communities, our communication styles are lesser than. It's the they statements. They're lazy. They don't care. They're not really here for school. They're not serious. Any time you hear they, it's usually one of those. And then the second concept I talked about was what's called race sliding, where essentially it's when we begin to question our own sanity and start to think that maybe they're right. Maybe it is us. Maybe I'm not as smart as I thought I was. Maybe I'm not as capable. Maybe I don't belong here. Maybe I am a problem. Maybe I'm not good. Maybe I don't belong here. I mean, and we start to believe these things because if we hear these messages over and over and over and over again, at first we have the power to reject them, but over time we can start to believe them even a little bit. And even when we start to let those things in a little bit, it starts to tear our soul apart. And then the third is racial battle fatigue, again, a concept by a good colleague, William Smith of University of Utah, which just recognizes that when we're in these environments and these things are happening to us, that there is a cost. And that cost is psychological, it's physiological. Racism has been shown to affect your body. It's been shown to affect your mind, your emotions. And sometimes like we think that it's just us. Right? Is it just me? Am I the only one experiencing this way? Am I being too sensitive? And in reality, what we've seen from the work on racial battle fatigue is that no, that there are some true, really important outgrowths of this, of this. I would like to just pivot a moment and just say that as a professor, I mentioned I have two of my students here, Michelle Deschanette, who's part of the Black Minds Matter project from the very beginning, and Muhammad Khas, who's also been part of the Black Minds Matter project from the very beginning. I want to respect and honor them because they've been involved in this work from the very beginning. Even when people told us not to do it, even when we were viewed as being troublemakers for saying that Black Minds Matter, it's amazing how far our country has come in a few years around it, where we can say that Black Lives Matter and Black Minds Matter without being viewed as radicals. But at the same time, though people have become more accustomed to those words, I don't know how much our predicament as Black people has changed, because we still continue to see that Black lives and Black minds are undervalued and over-criminalized. I would just conclude with three main points very quickly. What I tell anybody who's going into education, that includes Black educators or educators who are non-Black, first thing you have to do is, because I think it was Dr. Mosely who said that you can't just be any kind of Black educator, right? There's a certain way that you have to show up into this work. First, you have to maintain high expectations for your students. We have to believe in them. And I say it like this, that no one has ever risen to low expectations. So if we want our students to succeed and be able to achieve in the ways that we know that they can, we have to believe in them, and they have to know that we believe in them. The second is that we have to create a community within the community so that when students are in need of support, they know where to go to. Like if you're in higher ed, a student comes to you, you need to know somebody in financial aid. You need to know somebody in tutoring center. You need to know somebody in career services, because you can't just say, go there and refer them to a place and think that they're going to be treated with respect. It's no different than when we think about the Underground Railroad, right? You didn't just say slaves weren't escaping the South, going to the North and say, oh, just stop at any old house along the way. It was, you had to go to people who you knew cared about you and were going to protect you. And so I think it's, you know, we've heard a lot in education about people talking about doing a warm handoff, right? Where you go and you give a warm handoff to anybody in a specific area. Well, I just want people to remember this. You can't do a warm handoff to a cold person. So it has to be to the right person who will care about them in the same ways that you do and will advocate for them in the same ways that you do. And the last thing that I would say is that we have to have a curriculum that engages students in the right types of ways where they can see themselves in it. The folks in reading education had talked about the difference between what's called window books and mirror books, right? A window book is when you're looking outside the window into someone else's life, that the stories, the characters, the storylines aren't reflective of you, but of someone else's life and experience. We need children and adults who are in education to have mirror books, to have a mirror curriculum, to have a mirror experience where they're not looking out the window into someone else's life and culture, but they're looking at something that is a reflection of them. And that's what will ultimately give them the power that they need to be able to move forward in environments that were never designed for them, don't want them, and don't even want the Black educators in the room who are trying to support them and be part of that Underground Railroad. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wood. I mean, that leaves a lot, right? You know, amazing. I see hand claps. You know, schooling was never designed for us here in the United States in the first place. So that's something that we have to really look at. And I appreciate you. And I will make sure that we talk about Muhammad Khas towards the end. It is 6:58. I know we were going to end at 7. If you all don't mind, we will end at 7:05 because I want to give some respect to Dr. Fulcher and Dr. Mosely as well, and Lisa Kelly, about like solutions. You know, we've heard the problems, right? So what is the solution? What's the call to action that you want to leave all of us with?
I'll start, and I know the other two have quite a bit to say about this as well. You know, we talked about not just disrupting the system, and as Dr. Weber mentioned a few days ago, don't be afraid to break the rules. But also, someone in our group talked about we have enough qualified people, qualified Black people, and others who can be co-conspirators to create our own system. So let's not be afraid to look outside and think outside the boxes. We have to give our teachers an opportunity to also empty their cups. Being a Black teacher, being a teacher is difficult. Being a Black teacher is incredibly complicated and lonely. We need to have opportunities for them to come together and empty their cups. Their cups are full. They have a lot happening between principals or administrators who could be micromanaging, some who don't appreciate their work, and some who may just have racial intent. We need to make sure we provide either as a community, so it could be an external locus where this is situated, or internally through district staff. We need to give them a chance to come together and again, empty those cups. But can't be afraid to bring current events into the classroom and allow that, embrace it. And that kind of work happens. So there was some research done years ago that showed that most districts who hire and have more Black administrators, whether they be senior level administrators, principals, et cetera, tend to have more Black teachers. So we have to cultivate this type of environment in our districts and not be afraid to take a chance on some of these, on teachers, Black teachers, and also be willing to confront board members and trustees who, for whatever reason, might have some outdated, in our mind at least, outdated thoughts and opinions about Black staff. So let's be disruptive. And also let's be mindful of the hard work our Black educators are doing and what they're up against on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fulcher. Dr. Mosely or Lisa?
Yeah, even more than disrupt, my dream would be to dismantle this system of education that is so oppressive to the students that I teach, to me as an individual, to all of us, and to start dreaming about what we would want instead, right? I think it's Angela Davis who said that being radical is to look at things at the root, to grasp at the root in order to change it. And that's what I would do with our system. So where do we fit in all of that? Where in the different positionalities that we're at, what can we do if we banded together and we actually dismantled this and built something different?
Thank you, Lisa.
Really quickly, I'll just offer, I think, for those of you who have young people in your life, ask them if they have a Black teacher, ask them about their relationship with those Black teachers, talk to those Black teachers, encourage your cousins, siblings who have kids to ask at their school if there are Black teachers. For folks who are looking, understand, I think Dr. Fulcher said it in our breakout, you've got to create the environment for Black teachers to thrive. So we are not simply Black bodies to be moved in and out of a school system, right? This really is about shifting the environment. And so I think there's this personal connection that we have to have where we actually get, we're not just teachers, but people, but then also the systemic piece. So really bringing it to a place where folks can kind of see it and feel it. And Lisa said in our breakout earlier, donors choose platforms like that where teachers are asking for financial support or for resources. It's a quick way, for those of you who are givers, like if giving is part of your life, like that $20 what a Black teacher can do with $20 is a whole remix for students. So when you're thinking about giving, going to those pages and actually supporting teachers directly in their endeavors is also really, because we shift capitalism. We take it out of simply what the system's gonna do, and we start to circulate our dollar in Black communities, which means Black teacher communities as well.
Thank you, Dr. Mosely. And when I was listening to all of you, I was thinking African-centered schools, right? We need to have our own schools. And COVID has been a blessing and a curse, right? I mean, thinking about it, the good thing about it, which you're like, oh my God, could anything be good about COVID? Well, number one, many of us are teaching our kids at home anyway. And we're realizing that maybe our kids do need to see more of us, right? And so we need to take that money and start investing it into African-centered schools and outdoor environments as well, outdoor school environments, because our children learn differently. I want to take this time to thank each and every one of our panelists. This has been an amazing conversation. We must continue this at some point. I will make sure that the San Diego, the NAACP San Diego branch sends out a link to all of our panelists and extra information on each of them and the work that they do. I also want to invite you to continue this conversation. We're having a day 2 on our part 2 on Saturday. January the 27th. It's on our website, but we are going to have Dr. Grace Carroll. We're going to have Dr. Idara Essien, who is going to also continue the conversation about suspensions and expulsions. And she is co-authoring a study with Dr. Wood on the impact of suspensions and expulsions on preschoolers and their families, Black families. We will also have Rashida Hamid, who's going to be on there. We have Salam, who is going to be on there. She is a counselor. And most importantly, we're having Muhammad Khass. Muhammad is with the Black Lions Project. And so he's going to also talk about the suspensions and expulsions. So really important conversations. It's going to be moderated by Omari Flemings out here.
But if anyone else has, any one of our panelists would like to end this conversation with last thoughts, go right ahead. But I am just so grateful for each and every one of you and for all of the participants who joined us as well. And you know what? I'm sorry, I yielded back. I just want to end on this note. I see a note from Teresa. And Teresa, I share the sentiment with you. It's time for us to have a radical change. We need to demand that school districts hire more Black teachers. We need to demand that our children see people who not only look like them, but who care about them. And we need to also make sure that school districts and universities are not only hiring Black educators, but they're retaining them. And that goes for the counselors too. Counselors are critical because our children are already traumatized. I want to end on this note. Tomorrow will be the 1-year anniversary of the death of Ahmaud Arbery. So remember, Black children, Black families, Black educators, we are truly tired. Not only are we going through this pandemic of COVID-19, but we're going through the pandemic of racism and anti-Blackness. So we cannot do this work without you. We cannot do this work without advocates, without non-Black people who really understand and care about our children too. And there are a few of them out there. So stand up, speak out, and thank you all so very much for joining this conversation. Have a wonderful evening. I want to say Hotep, but good night. Thank
Hotep.
you. Hotep. Power to the people. Thank you. Peace be on to all of you. Have a good evening.
I appreciate this, Katrina. This has just been invaluable. You are so fabulous. So fabulous.
I'm a reflection of you, so you know this. Thank you. Thank you to all our wonderful panelists. I mean, we had an amazing lineup. Dr. Wood, Dr. Black, Dr. Alkebulan, Dr. Fulcher, Dr. Mosely, and Lisa, just amazing.